It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is What Made the Cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
And, of course, this portion of the hour brought to you by Trajan Wealth. For all of your retirement needs, look at the folks at Trajan Wealth, TRAJAN Wealth.com. Local trusted financial fiduciaries. Travis Yost, he's been covering the NHL for a long, long time, does it for TSN, and you can, of course, find his byline there. My goodness, Travis, we haven't talked in a few months, and we've got a lot of games under our belt now. I feel like you could start asking us questions about our NHL team here in Utah. I think we're ready now.
I was just about to thank you guys. This is, if you've seen my golf game, this is the first cut I've ever made. So I'm
good
just
for
very
you.
appreciative to get threaded in here. No, they not only do they have a lot of games under the belt, they're playing some competitive hockey, kind of like we talked about, huh?
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you because, you know, this Central Division's killer. We seem to be saying that every week, and maybe it's just to make ourselves feel a little bit better about the fact that there's a little bit of like that winning but feeling like you're in that same spot, kind of in that fifth spot in the division. But it's a really, really tough division to be in. But they are playing really, really good hockey. They couldn't string together one win after another. They would just win and then lose again. They win, maybe lose another two. And now finally they're able to kind of be on a little bit of a streak here. And even with the injuries that they've had, what is it that the Utah Hockey Club has figured out, do you think, over the last few months? It's gotten them to the point now that Bear and his guys have dialed it up a little bit more and are in kind of a winning zone right now.
I'll tell you, so a few things. Number one, I'm thinking back to when we did a couple preseason kind of forecasts, and we thought, yep, they're probably going to be fighting for that fourth spot in the Central because you've got this triumvirate of Winnipeg, Minnesota, Dallas, Colorado. Three of those four are going to really work to keep Utah out of the guaranteed playoff berths. But I think we said, hey, upside, thinking optimistically, they stay reasonably healthy, and bolded and italicized exclamation points, get some goaltending behind this young group. They absolutely can compete for one of the two wildcard berths. That's exactly where they are. I would say, and going into the Christmas period here, like I think things are looking pretty optimistic for Utah down if you look towards the next 3-4 months of the regular season. Now, you know, any 8-game losing streak can fundamentally change a team's plans, and they become sellers at the trade deadline in March, of course. But look where Utah is right now. They're in the middle of the most competitive division of the 4 divisions in hockey. That's number one. Number two, year to date, they have a positive goal differential on the year. And if you want to know how a team is going to play the rest of the way, and you're only made aware of one statistic, it's going to be margin of victory or goal differential. Utah is +3 on the year, and I remind you guys, one of the teams that they seem like they're chasing in Colorado, who's 3 points up, also has played 3 more games and is carrying a -6 goal differential because the goaltending has been an absolute disaster. So Utah really, there is definitely a class in the Central. I think Winnipeg, not just how they're playing, but the goaltending dominance they have, that's the type of team that is going to be almost impossible to catch, but they can play in this division. The one thing I would say to specifically answer the why is it looking optimistically, one of the key things I think they figured out, this coaching staff, they entered this season with a full-blown goaltending platoon, and there has been no bigger divergence in performance than across this entire lineup than when you look, one, at the goaltenders, and two, specifically, the, I would say, incredibly strong performance by Krovish Milka versus the awful year-to-date performance by Connor Ingram. I mean, there's really no painting around it, and I do wonder if that informs how Utah thinks about this platoon going forward, because it does feel more platoon-ish. But I also want to say one last thing on Fishmelka, too. That is, you know, if for whatever reason this season did go sideways and Utah's looking at, you know what can we sell to build into the future, that is a goaltender you could cash an awful lot of chips in with the way he's playing right now.
And you take the goaltending, you combine some great play by the young stars. Gunther's hot right now. Cooley's hot. I mean, you look around the league, is there a better pair of guys under 25 in the league right now? That the excitement around those guys and the fact that they're going to be here a long time combined with that goaltending has really spurred something here.
Yeah, I think I covered the Gunther line specifically because, I mean, he's got 13 goals, 16 assists on the year, point-per-game player, checking every box that you would want to see for the basic offensive measures. But what's even more, I think, even more encouraging, again, this is, I think, where you go glass half full with the younger players. Utah is destroying teams when Gunther is on the ice. This is not, you've got some young, promising offensive player that is scoring at a very high rate and then giving every single goal back in the defensive third. That is just not at all the case. I think at even strength, there are 10 goals to the upside in even strength goal differential of the year, that line specifically. So it's not just that the individual offensive numbers are very promising. It's that as a five-man unit, they're outplaying the opposition, and that's why they're carrying a positive goal differential on the year. That's why they've won six of their last 10 with points in 8 of their last 10. This is a team playing very well. One of the hallmarks, right? You have to have decent goaltending or better in the NHL. I mean, that is just a bare minimum. But one of the other hallmarks of a team that can stay competitive and or, qualify for the postseason, even make a deep push, you're at the top of your lineup, either the guys you're betting on long-term, figuratively or literally, where you've deployed your cap space, they need to be driving the bus, right? They need to be perpetually outplaying the opposition's best when they're on the ice, independent of how strong the goaltending is behind them, and that can be really hard depending on the environment. Utah is not only getting that from their young players, it's their young players at the top of the lineup. It's one of the most encouraging things I think you could point to about this team. It's that the young players seem the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, and at the individual level, they're also playing pretty well too.
Travis Yost, TSN, is where you can find his byline talking all things NHL. And we're trying to figure out this team kind of as we go along here. And one of the things that we've found out also is, it's one thing to have – Clayton Keller, your captain and an all-star, but there's a guy like Dylan Gunther who, we talked about the youth of these guys, but is it a surprise to see a guy who only played in 40 games last year and now this is his first real full go in the league from day one, to see him scoring those 29 points so far, 13 goals on the season? I think the club has been so excited about his development. Is it? I guess the word's not rare, but to have somebody come in and kind of overshoot what maybe the development kind of timeline is for them, is that something that happens often, or is Dylan Gunther kind of bucking a normal trend when guys take a little bit longer to develop?
No, I certainly – so there's a couple truisms there. So young forwards definitely have a better chance of early career success than young defensemen. That even in the modern era where every team is investing in young blue liners and introducing them earlier to the NHL level, forwards always have a better chance. It's more of a speed and skill game over the last 15, 20 years. So you've seen this outperformance from young players, but it's only a handful. It's usually only a handful of times a year, and it's a handful of players. I think back to when Dallas introduced Jason Robertson a couple seasons ago, when it was absolutely nuclear off the rip, right? And you kind of see this in pockets around the league. The Gunther story it's not. I wouldn't say it's exceptionally rare. You do see it, but I do think. At the heart of your question is, one, really what is the success? What is the recipe to actually drive performance amongst young players? Because that's the billion-dollar question that every front office is looking for. And I think over the years that one of the truisms, especially you have to understand, especially in hockey and basketball is probably the two biggest truisms. You have to understand how skill sets complement one another, right? And so Dylan Gunther, for example, phenomenal shooter, gets it off his wrist so quickly. He is exactly the type of player you want catching from a playmaker. Okay, who's my playmaker? Well, who has he played with the majority of the year? Logan Cooley, who is an exceptional playmaker. And I do think that in hockey, frequently when you see young outperformance, it tends to be because players are in very positive environments. They tend just so happen to land on a great team that's well insulated with veterans, or they are tied to the hip of someone who is a really strong playmaker. I've made this parallel in years past with the Toronto Maple Leafs, where Austin Matthews is if Connor McDavid doesn't exist, Austin Matthews has the crown as the best player in the world. But if you've looked over the years at Toronto, the reason why Matthews has been so successful is in large part he has always had at least one person who's either willing to do the dirty work when it comes to forechecking. I'm thinking of guys, Michael Bunting type names, where all the way up to, 5-star caliber playmakers like Mitch Marner, right? You can't just put guys out in an island in any sport. Definitely true in the NHL, but I think the fact that they've had cohesion and consistency on the line between Hayton and Cooley and Gunther, and the fact that all of them are developing in a positive light early in their careers, I think that's why you're seeing a lot of success there.
So it begs the question, should the Utah Hockey Club be aggressive here in maybe some in-season moves to try to get over the hump there, or should they stay the course, be patient, continue to hold on to the assets they have, and just let this ride out? What's the right answer there?
Well, I think everyone wants it to be the first, but the right answer is definitely the second. A very tactical – here's the reality, right? The most important question so far has been answered, which is, are these young players in the aggregate good? Any one of them may fail to develop. Any one of them may be considered a quote-unquote bust. But in the aggregate, this young pool of players that were previously prospects with the Coyotes, now young NHLers here, are they capable of outperformance? The answer is unequivocally yes, right? To me, that's confidence of we're good this year, but we're going to be a lot better in the years ahead. Two, your cap space, it can be very dangerous when you're a buyer in the offseason. Especially when the market is, ripe of free agents who are going to be looking to lean into the cap space teams have. Three, most importantly, I think there's an opportunity for a quick pivot. We mentioned the goaltending opportunities. Utah has a lot of very tradable, very attractive pieces that can fit on otherwise cap-stressed teams around the league. So if by chance Utah can either do some cosmetic selling, some very targeted selling across their lineup to earn, pick up more draft picks, more futures going into next season, I think they do that because the core of your team is going to stay intact, which means the core of your team should stay competitive. My point being, it should not disqualify where they're at right now. Every part of that team and that lineup should be thinking, how do we make it to the postseason? Because we can and we're capable. I mean, we have outscored the opposition year to date. That is just a fact. The question is, what do the next 2 months look like? And if they do go through a soft part of the schedule where they lose 8 of 11, whatever that number ends up being, what are those pieces that they say, look, you were great this year, you were great for maybe next year ahead, but you're not part of the long-term future. Let's keep stacking on what we already have, which is that young core that looks so promising.
Travis, one of the things and again, it's part of just us getting used to a little bit what the give and take is on the NHL side of things, kind of year in and year out, and we're used to other leagues being a little bit more of that home field or home court, and in this case, home ice advantage. Home ice advantage sometimes it doesn't, at least for the Utah Hockey Club right now. Now they've played a lot of games on the road, but they've had a lot more success on the road versus being at home. Is that an oddity, or is that just like, hey, that's the NHL, man? These teams, they don't care where they're at. They come into each barn, and you'll get the doors blown off you by any team in this league if you're not ready on any given night, even if it's at your home ice.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of both, right? So home ice, just like home court, just like home field advantage, has relatively deteriorated over the last 20, 25 years, right? You see that in college football point spreads all the way down. Yeah, you see it across the spectrum of sports, right? So there's definitely some truth that teams can go on the road and win, generally in North American sports. That's number one. Number two, hockey is such a volatile, low-scoring, lower-event game that your margin of error on single game outcomes is much more – talent wins out much more frequently over single games in basketball, for example, than it does in hockey, right? And you've seen probably 10 games this year. You could probably split them down the middle. 5 of them Utah won off lucky bounces or crazy caroms. The opposite is true in the other 5 games where they outplayed the opponents. That happens quite a bit over the course of the regular season. I say this because there is a lot of volatility in home road splits, and for the most part, it tends to follow the overall strength of the team. That said, there's always a part of me, and this is me arguing with myself, there's always a part of me that's like, okay, I don't really think much about Utah's poor home record this year. I think it's a bit of an outlier. But then if I don't ascribe anything to home ice advantage, do I really not think, Winnipeg and Vegas are 2 of the toughest places to play in because of those environments, the barns. I mean, both one place you never want to be on a given day. The other place, if you're there, you might be walking into an arena with an elevated blood alcohol content, right? Like, these are not places very conducive to winning on the road. But at the end of the day, like, I think overall it's the true strength of the team that tends to win out. Winnipeg is great at home because Winnipeg's a great team. Vegas is great at home because they're a great team. So I think it's much more of that than anything else. But, yeah, definitely interesting. Utah's been definitely a road warrior and leaving a little to be desired on home ice, at least so far.
The opponent tonight, the Vancouver Canucks. What are some of your observations about them as we get ready for this game tonight? They're only 4 games ahead of Utah on the schedule. What are your thoughts on the Canucks?
Yeah, really interesting season for the Canucks. They've also dealt with injuries similar to Utah. And ironically, if you said, hey, can you identify one team that is the mirror image of this Utah team, I would say the Vancouver Canucks, ironically enough. They have an extremely strong top 6. Their first pairing is absolutely deadly. That's probably a considerable advantage they have over most teams, including Utah. They've got between Demko, when he is in net, when he is healthy and available, he is one of the better 15-ish goalies you're going to find in the league, so they have some confidence in the goaltending. But look where they're positioned. Middle of the pack in the Western Conference, number 1, the same exact goal differential year-to-date as Utah, number 2, and also a team that has struggled incredibly at home. I think they've won 10 of 12 or 10 of 13 games on the road. So
Correct.
again, very almost a mirror image of the strengths and weaknesses that we've seen from this Utah team this year. The other reason why I think it's a good comparable too, although they're a little further along in their, I would say, developmental curve. Everything about the Vancouver Canucks and what's exciting, Elias Pettersson at the front of the lineup, Quinn Hughes anchoring their first pairing. It's really, really good younger players that are going to be a part of that franchise for a long period of time. Between their top forward, their top defenseman, and Demko and net, they've got one piece at each of the 3 key positions that is, a 10-year forever type player for the Canucks organization, and it's really about building around them at this point.
Travis Yost for TSN joining us here on JJ and Alex as we get you ready for this matchup tonight, the Vancouver Canucks and the Utah Hockey Club. Looking forward to it. Travis, thanks for being with us. And when we dive in next time, we'll be even more experts. We'll try to dip in when we're halfway through the season. That way, we'll know we're just kind of dipping in every quarter or so just to see if we're getting things right on our end on the analytical part. So we appreciate you coming on and educating us as we go through this thing.
I think by April I'm going to be interviewing you guys.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
Look at us.
Thanks.
Appreciate it, Travis. There you go.